Welcome back to JML Recording. Today is a bucket list kind of day. We have a huge treat for you. We're going to Sound on Sound Recording Studios. Sound on Sound was founded in 1987. They are one of the most iconic recording studios in all of New York City. Everyone recorded there, from Madonna to Biggie Smalls, you name it. And they've moved across the river into Montclair, New Jersey, only about 20 minutes outside of New York City. They have a huge commercial space there. Tony Drootin is a legendary studio manager that used to manage at Platinum Sound and Sony Studios on West 54th. He has teamed up with the owner of Sound on Sound, David AMLEN, the original Rude Boy. It went on to be one of the premier studios in New York City. Let's go talk shop. Let's go look at some gear. Let's go have some audio fun.
I'm Tony Drootin.
David AMLEN.
David AMLEN, and I'm Joshua Lutz. This is JML Recording. I want to talk today about the history, the legacy of this amazing studio. A lot of people might think Sound on Sound may have closed. It couldn't be further from the truth. Sound on Sound is very open and doing amazing things. You know, I just wanted to read really quick. Listen to this list of artists that these guys have worked with. Nicki Minaj, J. Cole, Madonna, Metallica, Jay Giles, Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey. Talk about name dropping. Bruce Springsteen, Rihanna, Beyonce, Kanye, John Legend, The Roots, Elton John, the list goes on. It's incredible. You guys must have some stories for the history books.
Yeah, I actually I started writing a book. I have to be careful because I can't really tell everything. I don't want to get sued, and also what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas in this industry.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, you know, Hillary Clinton, Steven Tyler, Britney Spears, Paul Newman, Pele did an album.
Pele.
Joe Pesci did an album. I've been in the room with Michael Jackson dozens of times. I have a credit on his album, you name it. But when it comes to recording studios, as an operations person, as a manager, I tell my staff, we're a hotel.
Service industry.
We are a service industry, and you know, when I started in the industry, Chris Lord-Alge was the chief engineer at Unique. Tom Lord-Alge was an assistant engineer. Jeff was an intern. Chris took me aside and said, and one of the things that has been my mantra to this day is, everyone has a tape machine, Pro Tools, everyone has a console, everyone has speakers. The studio with the best coffee wins, right? And that literally is our, and we have good coffee, we fresh grind, whole bean.
The book title might be in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Whoever has the best coffee wins.
Yeah, maybe.
But really our job is to be the detectives as to what they're trying to accomplish. The technical aspects of it are things that the staff goes through, like submarine drills. We practice, you learn the console, you learn signal routing, microphone placement, how to wrap a cable, all of those things. When someone comes in the door, how we act around them, how we behave, and our technical proficiency is what is the competitiveness that we have with other facilities. I started at Unique Recording Studios on West 47th Street, and that was before all the hotels were there, before Disney moved in. It was 3-card Monty on the sidewalks. It was chock full of nuts was still there.
We closed in 2016. It was still 3-card Monty on the sidewalks.
I mean, it's Manhattan, and Manhattan had its character, and there were tons of studios. It was a different era.
Let me ask you, the noise in the city that caused you guys to close.
Yeah.
What was the legality? How is that even?
Okay, so it's sort of complicated. That's the last iteration of Sound on Sound.
That's
Sound
right.
on Sound started on 45th Street. Then there was a competitor, major competitor that did like everyone. I mean, they were one of the top studios in the world, a place called Right Track. Post 2001, things were a little crazy in New York. I mean, business was kind of weird, and we all kind of got hit hard. So Right Track and Sound on Sound came to some sort of it wasn't technically a merger, it was a joining of operations, but we came to this agreement. We relocated the Sound on Sound facilities into multiple Right Track facilities. They had a scoring room that was like the size of a high school gym with taller ceilings. So, I mean, put 120 musicians in there, plus 4 huge ISO booths. We had Ryuichi Sakamoto's 9-foot piano in one of the booths, and nobody even noticed.
Wow.
But I mean, that lived there for like the entire
It was a 100+
duration.
channel SSL console.
Yeah. That was like a $10 million endeavor on Right Track's
and
part.
SIR is gone, and they all...
That put Right Track into bankruptcy as part of one of the reasons we all joined together, was that everyone was looking like the bottom had dropped out after 2001. And
And then,
trying to figure out how to survive. So we joined forces, and we became what was known as Legacy for a short period of time.
Pre-MSR.
Yeah, and when Legacy became MSR, it was like a 3-year period, and then it stopped being Legacy. The Right Track people retired as studio owners from the industry. The big room, I mean, that became a 38-story apartment building.
Incredible.
So I remember going in there. There's a place in there called the Legacy Cafe or Legacy Restaurant.
Oh, really?
And they got all these like fake things on the wall. They're like,
Right now,
yeah. They're still there.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember the guy talking. He goes, "Oh yeah. There used to be a famous studio here." I go, "Yeah, I know. That was my studio." so we're like
Did he
talking
buy you
about
a cup
this.
of coffee at least?
He was like, "Well, who really recorded there?" And we were talking about the things he thought were done there. And I'm like, sorry to burst your bubble, but that wasn't what we did here. Like all of that stuff, the hip hop, the cooler stuff wasn't done on 38th Street. We were doing big orchestras. We were doing Broadway shows.
Yeah, you've done a lot of Broadway.
New York was more of an SSL pop, mixing urban
music.
Pop and music, and LA was more, because of the real estate, more NEVE, vintage NEVE.
Tracking,
larger spaces. We did orchestras.
Broadway has always been New York. Had a good laugh in 2016 at what the prices were for real estate at the time. If it was something nice, you're out of business in a month. If it was something that was a dump, well, you're out of business because it's a dump.
Yeah.
So they just...
Yeah, real estate prices in Manhattan just became unmanageable for new facilities, including, for a place like this.
The great news is your clients have followed you across the river.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And I think New Jersey does have a thriving music scene.
It's always had, it's pretty funny, always a pretty thriving music scene, but there were maybe 1 or 2 facilities in the entire time that we've been in the industry that were actually built to any real technical and acoustic specs.
There's not a lot of studios in northern New Jersey that are this nice.
Look,
you don't have a ton of competition.
There's all different types of recording studios, all different types of music that they're servicing.
Yeah.
The level that we perform at, having been at the facilities and owned and managed and worked at the facilities, where you're doing large ensemble work and you need 70 sets of headphones and 50 music stands, and the consoles actually have to work because you have 36, 50 mics set up in the room.
It's not a hip hop session. You bring up the first
No, and look, there's nothing wrong with
There's
nothing wrong with
we
that.
Can do that also.
We can do that also, but because when you have 25 union musicians in the room, you can't say, hold on a second, we have to fix the console. Everything has to be working.
And you have an in-house
for the
tech,
most part.
I assume.
You're looking at him. Yeah. Dave has been
That's a
doing
whole nother interview.
We outsource others. We outsource certain things
stuff
too.
that when it's too crazy, I have relationships with some pretty serious people.
So when you pull a channel strip, you're fixing it though. Or you're
for the most part.
Most of the time I am.
Or John Musgrave. Being a good tech to me is knowing what you don't know. So, you have a certain skill set, and some people are good bench people, some people are good console people, some people are great with Pro Tools and digital routing and things like that. Almost everyone is not good at everything. But knowing where your limitations are, and knowing who to send specific gear out, and having the right phone book, and being able to troubleshoot things properly to determine how to fix it.
So
that's half the battle.
I can go here and I can sit through it and I can troubleshoot it and I can isolate exactly what subsection and probably what component it is that needs to be replaced. If it's a chip, I'll just do that myself. It's easy. If it's more involved, there's things that I won't do. Like there's a process for changing these physical switches that it needs infinite wisdom when they built it. They didn't build them as single switches. They built like this array of half a dozen or more that were all tied together. So you can't remove one without destroying the other 5. And John Musgrave actually came up with a technique using a hacksaw very, very carefully, so you don't destroy the circuit board, to remove the bad switch.
Wow.
I was like, I am not even attempting that. I don't care. What do you want to do that? Sure, done.
Yeah.
So there's like things I will not go near because I just know it would be stupid. But easy things, change a component. I mean, I troubleshot burned out voltage limiting resistors that How did it burn out? Who knows? But it was all the way buried on the bottom of a subboard, and I found it. And I replaced it.
Do you have any degree?
No, I have a math degree and a music degree.
Wow.
So, I mean, very early on, I had a console that, it was a NEOTEK, very highly regarded for its sound.
NEOTEK. Which series?
An Elite, that's what we had.
Great boards.
One of the first Elites, but we got it, it had the bad, the bad switches where they literally, like the switch guts weren't correct for the switch housing and they had to replace them all. That was a nightmare, but we went through that. But we always joked it was a NEOTEK, not a NEOTEK. And like one of the very, very first sessions we ever did, it's all ribbon connectors on the bottom of the modules. And one of the ribbons was phantom power for microphones. We had a brass choir in the studio. This was in New York, 87. There were probably 20 musicians out there, all dynamic mics, condenser mics plugged in because we wanted to capture all of the attack of the brass.
Okay.
The phantom on the board just disappeared. So none of the condenser mics were working, and to finish the session, pull 20 dynamic mics and just EQ a little bit to try to get close to the sound. But I mean, it's like that console was just full of surprises, but it sounded great when it worked. And one of the great things to learn on a board like that is you didn't have an SSL or a NEVE that had amazing headroom. It had limited headroom. So if you didn't do things properly, it bit you on the butt and things didn't sound good. So we very quickly developed some serious engineering skills working on a board like that. So when I work on something like this, it's like you don't want to be sloppy, but you could be and get away with it because the board is forgiving.
Do you guys track to tape a lot here, or do you find most of your clients aren't looking for
We're not at all, actually. Yeah.
Oh, no.
No tape.
No tape.
I got rid of the remaining tape machines I had in the
We've had the request made in 6 years, maybe twice.
Wow. And I just came from a studio last night. They almost exclusively are using tape. It just goes to show. It depends on the client.
There's some diehards that are still doing it. Yeah, you know, and power to them. And we have the capability of wheeling a machine in and connecting it. We built, you know, Dave designed the facility to accommodate that.
Are all the rooms tied in through these tie lines? I assume you can access
48 analog ties, plus like multiple digital tie lines, video tie lines. Okay, so here's a myth, because there are engineers that come in and insist on recording 32-bit and using all the channels. If you look at Pro Tools 32-bit, it's floating. It's 24-bit, but it'll figure out where those 24 bits need to be, but it only works if you're mixing in the box. If you're running through the console, it is a waste of 8 bits and a waste of data, and it's totally unnecessary. And I'll argue with anybody who goes, oh, I can hear the difference. It's like, no, you can't. Because the converters, I mean, think about it. Microphone, greatest dynamic range a mic will have between self noise and distortion. What are we talking? 110, 120 if you're lucky? Boy, that'd be amazing. So what is 24-bit? It's at least 144 dB. Boom, done.
Yeah.
So it's like, what's the extra bits for?
Redundancy.
It's wasted bits.
We built big rooms with a lot of isolation, and when the pandemic hit, we really benefited from that. People were coming here because they were doing cast albums, and they wanted to have a separate ISO booth for all the vocalists, and the SAG-AFTRA requirements for COVID requirements mandated that they were all isolated, and we could combine both rooms and get 6 isolation booths.
The other room got Dolby Atmos certified not too long ago.
What's your ideal client right now?
I mean, the stuff that we really love is live music, you know. And I've worked in Manhattan for decades, and LL Cool J, Cold Crush Crew. So I went through the hip hop, the dance era, pop. But the stuff that, you know, because we're trained musicians, we're music majors, we love seeing live music being performed.
The thing about the NEVE in this room, it's different than most VRs. So
how's that?
So John Musgrave, he's kind of considered the guru, one of the gurus in this industry. This is one of only 6 boards in the world that's fully had all the Musgrave updates. He went and put in the hi-fi OPA chips.
Wow.
It probably cost 5 to 10 times what the NEVE chips were originally.
Wow.
The characteristic of a VR is a little bit of this lower mid-range mush. Don't get that on this.
Wow. That's the one complaint people have about
Always had it,
VRs,
yeah.
and you've removed it.
We removed it.
So this is what you're using on most sessions right here?
Some of it. I mean, most of what I try to do, put a microphone up, pick the right mic, place it correctly.
Pay attention, folks.
Yeah. This is from the Al Schmidt school of how to record stuff, is pick the right mic and place it correctly, and then you do almost nothing.
You know what? That might be one of the greatest pieces of audio advice on the internet today.
I find that when I'm doing mixes, I do very little EQ in the mixes, maybe like, 1 or 2 dB of boost, if that.
So
If that, just for like maybe added definition on the top. But I'm like a fervent believer in filters. There's a friend of mine out in the West Coast now who's like a great mix engineer who sort of hit me up to that. Like that was his whole thing when he would do a mix. Filters on everything. Because it's like, get rid of all the mud and the stuff that's ruining the clarity of the sound. And you think about energy. And low frequencies use a lot of energy. So if you get rid of the gook that you don't need, things become more open and punchy.
what's your best piece of advice to up-and-coming engineers or even intermediate engineers about creating separation in a mix if they're ITB, if they're stuck in the box?
Okay, well, panning is really helpful. I mean, start on the macro level, get macro, the big picture. So it's like what a lot of executives always like to talk about, the 35,000 foot view, like you're looking down. So big pictures, get rough levels, balances and everything, and what needs to be here, what doesn't need to be here in a mix. Now you can sort of get a little bit more creative, spread things out. How do you pan it? Separation. So like, everything down the center. And I find this, because I do teach at MSU as an adjunct, I found that a lot of the kids who give me projects, the mixes are like this instead of like this. It's like, it may only be stereo, but you can use it. You can take advantage of panning things. Here's a good tip, because we have a client who used to say, I hate Genelecs, I won't use them, and would come in every couple months with a different set of near fields and never be happy with what he was hearing. And here's the lesson is, pick a set of speakers and just learn them.
Exactly.
Learn what lots of different music and lots of different things sound like. It doesn't have to be the perfect speaker, but it has to be something that you can rely on.
I've heard other engineers say that familiarity with the speaker is what's most important.
Yep.
If you know how it's going to translate, who was it, like Bruce Swedien or someone that had these old tannoys and these old rickety wooden boxes, and he's like, I know these monitors so well, I know that I can mix on these better than some $50,000 pair of blah blah blah.
So when I first got 1031s, and it was the early 90s, so it's going back quite a ways.
Oh, these used to be in every studio on the planet. It was the Genelec 1031s. This was the
1031As, yep. And we had a pair of Westlake BDSM 4s. We ended up trading them in for another pair of 1031s because people were like, yeah, those are cool, but I like the 1031s. They just became sort of the standard.
And the market now, if anyone out there is in the market for these, you can pick them up at a pretty reasonable price now.
$2,000 a pair. So the only thing to be wary of is that you can blow them up.
Oh, really?
They do have circuit protection in them, but if it starts to flash red and you ignore it, you will blow them up.
Something I ask everybody I interview is, did you have the Tascam Portastudio?
I had the Portastudio, but not the one that Bruce had. I had the model, not the 144, the 244, which had 2 extra channels.
424 is the one I had. But everyone I interview had one. It's incredible.
I had a 244, and then I went to AES in 1985, walking around with a buddy of mine who actually knew this stuff much more than I did. And we're registering, and they're like, what's the name of your company? And I just didn't want to be some kid who was like, because nobody will talk to you. So I just made up a name. I was like, Simon Thing Recording. Yeah, there you go.
Les Paul. Is that where you got it from?
Well, that was sound on Ampex machines.
Exactly.
But the recording was just sounded like an
It must have been in your head or something, yeah.
Well, I actually didn't even associate it with Ampex until years later. Somebody goes, oh, that's what they called what Les Paul did. And I was like, oh, great.
There's a great picture of him. What model Ampex was it?
300.
Yeah, he's standing and he's like...
Oh, it was 8 channels. It was an 8-track, but each one was like this.
To the ceiling, yeah. Incredible.
Yeah, so I had a tech that actually was almost like an adopted son of his and used to be there all the time. We had him come in and he was like a blast to have in the studio. Had all these great people come in. Dr. John, he was a riot. He's everything you would expect him to be, and then some.
What was your favorite session at Sound on Sound?
But I got to work with David Bowie on stuff when he and Tony Visconti were first, after many years of not working together, this was the first sessions they did together. And Tony used to do a lot of stuff with us, and he used to engineer for him, so we became buddies. And he brought David in, and that was like a thrill. And I don't get starstruck often. And I do remember a really funny part is why my assistant engineer, he was a little starstruck and he was like, is it possible we could get a picture with you? And David goes like this and stands there, and we have to kind of negotiate our ways in around him. And he's just standing here like a cardboard cutout to take the picture with us. It was actually pretty funny. But here's a dude who would go into the live room, you put the thing up, he listens to it, he does a take, he maybe fixes one or two things, done. So one of Tony's buddies that I met worked on remixing a lot of these tracks for Sony, and he brought in something he shared with me. It was Michael Jackson Beat It with the Eddie Van Halen solo, but it was the original configuration. He did it on a Mitsubishi 32 track. And that's a digital machine that had 32 tape tracks as opposed to 24 2-inch, or the Sony 24, which later became a Sony 3348, but 32 tracks on 1-inch tape. Eddie goes and plays at the beginning of the song over the changes. It's the same changes throughout the song. Plays at the beginning, puts his guitar down, and goes, I think I'm good, and he left. And so they had to take that and transfer that into the solo section because he hadn't played there. But it's just kind of funny. You go, well, oh, that's how it happened.
To have all of this knowledge and all this experience you have and bring it to a studio, it makes Sound on Sound a very special place.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure, yeah.
Yeah, and
nice to meet you.
Yeah, you as well. And maybe we'll be back sometime. But
that would be great.
If you want to contact Sound on Sound, of course, it's Sound on Sound Studios.
SoundOnSoundStudios.com.
.com.
Yeah.
All right, this has been JML Recording, and we'll see you next time.